Hello everyone, I'm Coach Tickety, and today we're going to be ranking and placing every single tank in Overwatch 2 on a brand new tier list. With the new mid-season patch hitting and really shaking up the meta, there's going to be some new tanks you'll want to start playing, maybe one in particular you've probably already seen a lot of, but we're going to talk about every single one of them and break them down here in this video. If you guys like this type of content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and if you're looking for more educational content, looking for more ways to improve your play, then you should head over to GameLeap.com. Over there on our website, you will find hundreds of guides made by top-level coaches, and there's more being added every single week. So no matter who you're playing, what rank you're sitting at right now, I promise you will find something that will help you master your given hero choice and help you climb up the rankings this season. Our guides cover everything from the pure fundamentals about the game to in-depth step-by-step hero guides to help you really maximize your playstyle. So if you're really looking to improve, all you have to do is click that link below the video and get your membership started today. Alright, now let's talk tanks. We're going to start down in the C tier, and there's only going to be one tank we're putting down here, and that's going to be Roadhog. It's not that you can't find success while playing Roadhog right now, it's just that it's very inconsistent and there are way too many things in the game that can actively counter you. Even back when Roadhog could one-shot combo a squishy DPS or support member on your team, he still wasn't that big of a threat since there are so many defensive abilities that can deny his playmaking. And now that he no longer has that combo and he still hasn't been reworked into whatever Blizzard has cooking up behind the scenes, he doesn't really have a strong identity right now. Sure, he can go around the map looking for flank plays and big hooks, but those hooks rarely lead to a full-blown elimination and more often than not will get Roadhog punished instead. And while he does put out more damage than most tanks in the front line, he also has very little defensive value that he can offer even himself, let alone his teammates, so it's very often that Roadhog will just find himself getting run over by the enemy team instead. Right now, I can really only recommend playing Roadhog into a tank like Winston or Wrecking Ball, who can be denied by his hook potential and really suffer against his shotgun, or on maps with a lot of environmental kill potential like on Ilios Well. Alright, with Roadhog out of the way, we can move right up into the B tier, and these are going to be heroes that I think are still strong and viable in their own rights, but maybe they've got some stronger counterparts or are more easily countered than some other tanks on the list. First tank here is going to be Winston. The rise of Junker Queen unfortunately means the fall of Winston this patch. He's way too susceptible to getting hit in the face with big shotgun blasts or having his movement interrupted by jagged knife pulls. The best part of Winston's kit right now is definitely his defensive barrier, his bubble shield that he gets to put down anytime he dives in. This is a great defensive tool for helping you enable any aggressive DPS that are diving in with you and let them buy enough time to hopefully finish up some kills before they have to back up. Unfortunately, with Winston being so easy to counter with shotguns or poke damage or just by running away from him sometimes, he'll often have to use this barrier just to keep himself alive and won't always have it available to go all in offensively. So yeah, while Winston is strong right now and he can enable a very aggressive dive, he's also very susceptible to a lot of sources of damage in the meta right now. Next up in the B tier is going to be Doomfist, and Doomfist is always a hard hero to rank because of how skill dependent he is. You could be the best Doomfist in the world and that would make him S tier, or you could be picking him up for the first time and make him F tier. Overall, while he can absolutely take over the lobby when used properly, Doomfist suffers too much when the enemy just starts putting too much attention into him. As long as you're not charging up his power block on cooldown and you're just poking him out before he gets to set up his rollouts, Doomfist has a hard time really getting into a fight and getting value and surviving without any real defensive cooldowns other than that directional power block. So while the skill ceiling is definitely through the stratosphere when it comes to Doomfist, there are simply too many things that can possibly go wrong in a game of Overwatch that really deny you from playing the game, let alone getting much value as Doomfist. Next up on the B tier is going to be Reinhardt, and while I think Reinhardt is in an okay spot in terms of meta right now, he's a great frontliner and frontliners are pretty dominant right now. He does have some pretty bad losing matchups against characters like Rampart and now even Junker Queen. With that said though, Rein still has some of the best playmaking tools in the game on a tank with both the one-shot kill potential of his pin and of course his ultimate Earth Shatter. Unfortunately for Reinhardt, when you're going for those offensive plays, you are going to need a good amount of support from your teammates, so if they're getting denied value by getting pushed out of space or don't have cooldowns available for you, you might just end up feeding instead of making play the game. Overall, Rein is still pretty good right now. If he's your main, you should definitely keep playing him. Just keep in mind that if your team isn't keeping up with you, you might need to make some swaps to make it easier on them. Next up in the B tier is going to be Sigma, and while Sigma is an excellent pick on some very specific maps like Circuit Royale for example, he's too inflexible in a lot of other situations. He's too vulnerable to getting surrounded to be any higher than the B tier for this video. Sigma's biggest flaws right now are that he's too squishy to keep up with other tanks in the front line like Reinhardt or Orisa. He'll often get pressured out away from those matchups, and his defensive resources are great, but they only really work in one one direction, meaning Sigma can really only deny one angle at a time, which is fine on a map like Circle Royale when there's only really one angle to worry about, but on other types of maps where there's too many flank routes, long sight lines, or high grounds to worry about, then Sigma usually has to give up a lot of space, and his team can't always afford to do that. So for now, he stays in the B tier. Next up in the B tier is going to be Zarya. And this might be a controversial placing for Zarya. A lot of players I'm sure think she deserves to be higher because she is seeing a good amount of play right now, even in high levels. But I think this is a fair placing since I believe Zarya can pretty easily be countered by range and mobility, which is very relevant right now, and because her bubbles are very team dependent. If you're only using bubbles for yourself on Zarya, you're really not getting the maximum value out of this character, and in a ranked setting, you can't always depend on your teammates to be good bubble targets. Zarya has some of the highest peaks out of any character in the entire game, let alone just tanks, because of her charge mechanic, the playmaking potential of her bubbles, and of course the powerful nature of her ultimate Graviton Surge. But once you're in game, it can feel very hard to ramp up into those moments if you're not able to get enough value yourself or even stay alive long enough to find any value at all. So yeah, similar to Doomfist here, the potential on Zarya is massive, but really the realistic expectations of her are relatively mid. Alright, moving on, our last tank rounding out the B tier here is going to be Orisa. Orisa is one of the simpler tanks in the roster, which makes her very easy to pick up and play and usually find consistent value with. However, it is also usually pretty easy to outplay in Orisa because she doesn't have the biggest playmaking tools in her kit. Orisa is just stacked with defensive pressure. She's got two very strong defensive cooldowns with both Javelin Spin and her Fortify, and she's got an incredibly strong HP pool with a ton of armor, which can make it very hard to move her out of the way when you need to. But unless you're able to fully lock down an enemy team trying to push around a corner or through a tight choke point or things like that, it can be pretty easy to either outrange or outmaneuver in Orisa since she doesn't really have any meaningful mobility or much range on her abilities. And since she doesn't offer too much when it comes to getting aggressive, the other team usually can take as much time as they need to come up with a plan to beat that Orisa's cooldown. So if they start lining up more things than you can deal with, you can only press so many buttons. Overall, Orisa is a solid choice if your team is just getting hit by a freight train in the front line and just getting completely rolled over, since you'll be able to slow down that type of aggression better than anyone else with all of your defensive abilities. Just don't expect too many big play of the game moments. Moving up to the A tier, where I don't believe these heroes are much stronger than the B tier heroes, but I do believe they are much more consistent. And our first pick here is going to be Wrecking Ball. Compared to Winston and Doomfist in the B tier, Wrecking Ball's engages are much more consistent, happen more frequently, and are much safer to engage with. And even if you don't find those all-in pile driver one-shot kills when you're engaging, you can always find value by rolling around as a fireball and displacing your enemies so they end up chasing you around the map. And now that we see the meta trending towards more brawly frontline based compositions, Wrecking Ball is going to be your best dive tank in those situations since displacement and slowing them down is the name of the game. And while you might need to grind out a little bit of your mechanics on Wrecking Ball to get used to his movement, it is pretty weird after all. Once you get the hang of it, you'll be making plays in no time. Just make sure not to go all in aggressively unless you know you can get out safely, because you're usually better off waiting for another attempt instead of trying to force the one you're currently set up for. And next up in the A tier, I'm going to put Diva. And I view Diva and Wrecking Ball as kind of like two sides of the same coin, where Wrecking Ball can almost always be set up to go in aggressively, Diva can almost always be set up to respond to situations defensively. I like to refer to Diva as a first responder in Overwatch. Anytime there's an emergency going on with her team, maybe someone's taking a duel that they're losing, maybe your backline's getting dove, Diva is the first on the scene with her boosters and her defense matrix ready to go. And while it can be a little bit hard to get aggressive sometimes as Diva compared to some other mobile tanks like Wrecking Ball or Doomfist, the flexibility of your defensive utility more than makes up for that. There is no better tank in the game when you need to hold space against multiple different kinds of threats, whether that's long sight lines, high ground pressure, mobile flankers, or anything like that. Diva can do it all. Just keep in mind that with so much flexibility in your kit as Diva, it's on you to have the higher level awareness to make sure you're responding to the right things at the right time, since you can't quite be at two places at once, although Diva gets pretty close. And that will bring us up into the S tier. These are going to be the heroes that I believe are the strongest tanks in Overwatch 2 right now, and I believe you should be able to play them pretty much anywhere in any situation and still expect success. Our first tank here is going to be the newly buffed Junker Queen. Oh man, Junker Queen. To be honest, I think Blizzard overdid it. I think they overbuffed this hero. She feels incredibly strong, incredibly explosive. She builds her ult crazy fast, and it feels very hard to deal with her right now. But of course, with any hero, you still need to know what you're doing and how to find the maximum value, or if you're playing with a Junker Queen, you can't just sit back and relax because she does need help around the map. Junker Queen is kind of like the new and improved Roadhog. She wants to sit around the front line and trade blows with her shotgun while trying to find those big hit moments with her knife throw, which isn't quite as strong as Roadhog's hook, but I promise it gets the job done. But what she has that's much better than Roadhog is team-wide defensive utility with her commanding shout that provides overhealth and speed boost, a much stronger ultimate with Rampage compared to Whole Hog, this thing blows it out of the water, and just more consistent damage output overall. Oh, and I should also mention now with the new buff, much stronger self-sustain as well. When you put all these things together, it means that Junker Queen can find kills just as soon as she lands some abilities, and she's incredibly slippery and hard to kill herself because of her self-sustain now. Just keep in mind that when you're playing on the Queen, you need to find good value from your abilities, otherwise you don't do nearly as much damage and you can't be self-sustaining nearly as well either. So you shouldn't be going all in unless you know you're guaranteeing a kill or two, or at the very least some strong self-sustain with maybe your ultimate or a big carnage swing. And right next to Junker Queen in the S tier is going to be Ramatra. Ramatra's just a really good tank, you know? He's got abilities for every situation. He's got slowing, he's got poke, he's got close range brawling, he's got damage reduction, he's got a shield, he's got a plug and play ultimate that's impossible not to find value from. He's just got something for every situation, and he stays ready to go in almost any composition. But with that said, Ramatra usually finds the most success when he's in defensive situations and the enemy needs to approach him, since he doesn't really close distance very well compared to other tanks. So if you're trying to burst through a choke point around an important corner, Ramatra isn't always the best person to lead the charge, well, unless he's got his annihilation ready to go, but in almost any other situation, he can stay ready to respond to any threat and counter it very effectively. He's also one of the few frontline tanks that I believe has a favorable matchup against Junker Queen, since his shield and slow can really deny a lot of her value. Overall, the tank meta right now seems to be trending a lot more towards brawly frontliners and away from those fast-moving dive tanks that we've been seeing a lot previously. The Junker Queen buff alone, I'm sure, is making a lot of tank players second guess their dive tank preference when loading into their maps. So be careful out there, there's a lot of damage being flung around, but just because frontliners are popular doesn't mean they're the only viable picks. I still believe that every tank in the game right now, maybe except for Roadhog, is a viable pick and is a strong hero in their own right. As long as you know what you're doing with the hero, that's really all that matters. And if you're looking for more educational content, looking for more ways to improve your play, then you should head over to GameLeap.com. Over there on our website, you will find hundreds of guides made by top-level coaches, and there's more being added every single week. So no matter who you're playing, what rank you're sitting at right now, I promise you will find something that will help you master your given hero choice and help you climb up the rankings this season. Our guides cover everything from the pure fundamentals about the game to in-depth step-by-step hero guides to help you really maximize your playstyle. So if you're really looking to improve, all you have to do is click that link below the video and get your membership started today. Anyway, that's it for me today, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.